the NHRA hit something in drag racing history that still shocks people to this day. It was 1957, speeds on the drag strips were climbing like rockets. In the first week of February, at Lyons drag strip, Emory Cook piloted his nitro-powered dragster to a blistering 166.97 miles per hour, the first quarter-mile pass ever to break 160 miles per hour, a record that engineers at the time called impossible. But just 3 days later, everything changed. Track owners and NHRA founder Wally Parks made a decision: nitromethane, nitro fuel, would be completely banned. The official reason given was simple: too dangerous. Engines were exploding, fires were breaking out, and the safety risk was spreading everywhere. This was the NHRA's most controversial moment. A technology that could have pushed drag racing years ahead was suddenly buried and hidden from the sport. Was it really just about safety, or was there something more? Today, we're opening up this hidden chapter of drag racing history. Early drag racing's Wild West. The early 1950s were the true Wild West of drag racing. After World War II, hot rodders and veterans turned abandoned airstrips and dry lake beds into makeshift quarter-mile battlegrounds. There were no strict national rules yet, just raw speed, innovation, and a whole lot of danger. The National Hot Rod Association, founded in 1951 by Wally Parks, was still young and fighting to bring order to the chaos, moving racing off public streets and onto controlled tracks for safety and legitimacy. By the mid-1950s, engines were getting more powerful. Flatheads gave way to overhead valve V8s, especially the Chrysler Hemi, which became a favorite for its massive potential. Racers experimented with everything to squeeze out more horsepower: bigger carbs, better intakes, higher compression. But the real game changer arrived in the late 1940s and early 1950s: nitromethane, or nitro, as everyone called it. Nitromethane wasn't new. It had roots in model airplane and tethered car racing right after the war. Hot rodders like Vic Edelbrock discovered it could dramatically boost power because it carries its own oxygen. Unlike gasoline, which needs about 14.6 parts air to 1 part fuel for perfect combustion, nitro runs much richer, closer to 1:1 or even 1.5:1. That means you can dump massive amounts of fuel into the cylinders, and it burns violently, producing incredible horsepower. Engines that might make 300 to 400 horsepower on gas could suddenly jump to double or triple that on nitro. Speed started climbing fast. By 1955 and 1956, nitro-burning cars were posting impressive numbers at places like Santa Ana Drag Strip. The first commercial strip, opened in 1950 by C.J. "Pappy" Hart, and Lyons Drag Strip in Long Beach, managed by the legendary Mickey Thompson. Thompson, a true innovator, was always pushing limits. He later designed the first slingshot dragster chassis. Nitro cars brought huge crowds. The flames, the smoke, the earth-shaking launches, it was pure spectacle. But this power came with massive risks. Nitromethane is volatile and unforgiving. Engines ran extremely hot, parts stressed to the breaking point. Flywheels exploded, clutches failed, fires erupted without warning. Crashes were frequent and often catastrophic. Insurance companies started paying attention, warning track owners that high-speed nitro runs could make policies impossible to maintain or sky-high in cost. Promoters like Hart and Thompson faced a tough reality: keep pushing the envelope and risk shutting down, or rein things in to protect the sport's future. The turning point came in early 1957. Speeds had been creeping up all through 1956, with racers hitting 150 miles per hour and beyond on fuel. Then, on February 3, 1957, at Lyons Drag Strip, San Diego racer Emory Cook unleashed something the sport had never seen. In his nitro-powered dragster, he set a new track record early in the day, then kept going. On his final run of 6, Cook clocked a blistering 166.97 miles per hour, becoming the first to officially break 160 miles per hour in the quarter mile. The drag racing world was stunned. Engineers had said it was impossible, now it was reality. That single performance sent shockwaves. Within 24 hours, C.J. Hart announced that, starting the next weekend, Santa Ana would allow only straight gasoline, no nitro, no alcohol blends. Safety and insurance concerns were the official reasons, but the sudden 160+ mph barrier had promoters worried about crowds, liability, and the sport's image. Mickey Thompson at Lyons quickly followed suit, and other Southern California tracks joined in. When Wally Parks returned from the National Speed Trials in Daytona, where he was setting records in a Hot Rod magazine-sponsored Plymouth, he found the Western tracks in revolt. Many threatened to leave NHRA if the organization didn't adopt the gas-only rule. Parks, focused on keeping drag racing organized, safe, and growing nationally, had little choice. He extended the policy to the upcoming NHRA Nationals and eventually to all sanctioned tracks. This wasn't just a rule change, it was the infamous nitro ban that lasted from 1957 until 1963, with a brief experimental return in 1963 before full reinstatement in 1964. Nitro cars went underground or migrated to rival organizations like the NHRA, which welcomed them with open arms. Independent, smokers, meets popped up, and dual-engine gas dragsters became the new stars to fill the spectacle gap. The early 1950s wild era had ended. Drag racing survived, but the ban slowed technological progress on fuel for years. It forced innovation in other areas, like superchargers, chassis design, and safety equipment, while creating a divide that shaped the sport for decades. Was it the right move for safety? Or did it hold back what could have been even faster evolution? That's the tension at the heart of this story. The biggest cover-up, the 1957 NHRA nitro ban. The decision came fast and it hit the drag racing world like a thunderclap. Just 3 days after Emory Cook's groundbreaking 166.97 miles per hour run at Lyons Drag Strip on February 3, 1957, C.J. Pappy Hart, the pioneering operator of Santa Ana Drag Strip, the very first commercial drag strip in America, made an announcement that changed everything. Starting the following weekend, Santa Ana would run gasoline only. No nitromethane, no fuel blends, no exceptions. Mickey Thompson, running Lyons Drag Strip, quickly followed with the same policy. Within weeks, most major Southern California tracks had fallen in line. When Wally Parks returned from the Daytona Speed Weeks, where he had been overseeing record attempts for Hot Rod magazine, he faced a full-blown crisis. Track operators were threatening to pull out of the NHRA entirely if the national organization didn't back the gasoline-only rule. Parks, a visionary who had founded the NHRA in 1951 specifically to legitimize hot rodding and get it off the streets, understood the stakes. Without insurance, without police cooperation, and without public acceptance, organized drag racing could collapse. The sport was still fighting for respectability against headlines that painted hot rodders as reckless street racers. So Parks made the call. The NHRA adopted the gasoline-only policy for all its sanctioned events, including the prestigious Nationals. What started as a regional safety measure became national law within the NHRA. Nitromethane was effectively banned from NHRA competitions starting in 1957, and that ban would remain in place for 6 long years, until experimental runs were allowed again in 1963, with full top fuel reinstatement coming in 1964. To many racers and fans at the time, this felt like the suppression of the future. Nitro-powered cars were producing horsepower numbers that gas cars simply couldn't match. They were the cutting edge, the spectacle that drew huge crowds. Overnight, that edge was dulled. The cars that could run 160 to 170 miles per hour were sidelined, replaced by dual-engine gas dragsters and supercharged gas cars that, while innovative in their own right, couldn't deliver the same raw thrust or visual drama of a nitro burnout. Critics called it a cover-up. They argued it wasn't just about safety, though safety was undeniably a real concern. Explosions, fires, and clutch failures were common with nitro, and tracks were rightly worried about spectator injuries and skyrocketing insurance premiums. But there was another layer: control. By enforcing gasoline only, the NHRA centralized power and created a more predictable, insurable, and marketable version of the sport. Independent promoters who wanted to run nitro shows were pushed outside the NHRA umbrella, often aligning with rival organizations like the American Hot Rod Association, NHRA, which happily welcomed nitro cars and staged massive smokers meets throughout the ban years. Nitro didn't disappear, it went underground. Match races, unsanctioned events, and NHRA-sanctioned meets kept the flame alive. Legendary names like Don Garlits, Art Chrisman, and TV Tommy Evo continued experimenting with nitro in non-NHRA venues. Garlits himself ran nitro in Florida and other regions where the ban wasn't strictly enforced. These outlaw nitro runs often drew bigger crowds than the official NHRA events, proving the demand was still there. The ban also forced innovation in other directions. With nitro off the table, builders focused on chassis design, aerodynamics, tire technology, and supercharging. The iconic slingshot dragster layout, engine behind the driver, became dominant because it allowed longer wheelbases and better weight distribution on gas. Safety improvements accelerated too, Better fire systems, stronger flywheels, and containment blankets all emerged during this period out of necessity. Yet the lingering question remains, did the NHRA bury a technology that could have advanced the sport years earlier? If nitro had been allowed to develop continuously from 1957 onward, with safety rules evolving alongside it, might we have seen 200 miles per hour in the quarter mile by the mid-1960s instead of waiting until 1969? Many old-timers believe yes. They point to the fact that when nitro was finally reinstated in Top Fuel in 1964, speeds jumped dramatically almost immediately. Don Garlits ran 200 miles per hour within months, and the class exploded in popularity. Wally Parks always defended the decision as necessary for the survival of organized drag racing. In interviews and articles over the years, he stressed that without the ban, the sport might have been outlawed entirely by authorities and insurers. He saw it as a painful but essential step toward professionalism. Others, especially those who lived through the nitro heyday of the mid-1950s, saw it differently, as the moment the NHRA chose control and caution over raw progress. Whatever side you take, one thing is undeniable. The 1957 nitro ban was the closest thing drag racing has ever had to a true cover-up. A revolutionary fuel and the incredible machines built around it were pushed out of the spotlight for years. The cars they didn't want you to see in official competition became legends in the shadows, waiting for their comeback. And when that comeback finally arrived, drag racing was never the same again. The 1957 nitro ban wasn't the only time the NHRA stepped in to suppress or outright ban cars and technologies that threatened the established order. Over the decades, several high-profile cases have fueled the narrative of cars they didn't want you to see, machines so advanced, so fast, or so unconventional that the sanctioning body either blocked them, forced major changes, or quietly made them disappear from official competition. One of the most talked about modern examples came in 2017 with Larry Dixon's radical two-seater Top Fuel dragster. Dixon, a three-time NHRA Top Fuel world champion, teamed up with builder Don Schumacher Racing to create something truly wild, a full Top Fuel chassis fitted with two seats, one for the driver and one for a passenger. The car was built as a promotional stunt to showcase the raw power and terror of nitro racing up close. It made its public debut at the 2017 SEMA show, where it drew massive crowds and media attention. The plan was to run it at select NHRA events as a special exhibition, but the NHRA had other ideas. Shortly after SEMA, officials quietly demanded that all NHRA branding, stickers, and logos be removed from the car. They refused to allow it to make exhibition passes at any sanctioned event. Dixon and the team were told the car didn't fit existing safety rules for two-seaters in Top Fuel, and that approving it would open a Pandora's box of liability and rule complications. Some insiders called it suppression of innovation. Others said it was simple common sense. Top Fuel already pushes human limits, and adding a passenger was asking for disaster. Either way, the two-seater became a ghost car, built, photographed, celebrated for a moment, then effectively banned from the sport's biggest stage. Today it sits as a one-off legend, rarely seen outside private collections. Another high-profile clash involved Dodge's factory-built monsters, the 2018 Challenger SRT Demon and its even more extreme successor, the 2023 Demon 170. These weren't dragsters, they were street-legal production cars designed from the factory to run sub-9-second quarter-mile times on street tires. The original Demon came with an 840 horsepower supercharged V8 and a suite of drag-specific features, a trans brake, line lock, drag radials, and even a drag mode that optimized the car for the strip. Dodge proudly marketed it as the world's fastest street-legal production car, capable of 8.7-second runs with minimal prep. The NHRA responded swiftly. In 2018, the organization declared that the Demon could not compete in any NHRA stock or super stock class without a full roll cage and other safety upgrades that would destroy its street-legal status. The official reason: the car was too fast for the existing safety standards in those classes. When the Demon 170 arrived in 2023, with 1,025 horsepower on E85 and an advertised 8.4-second capability, the NHRA doubled down. The car was effectively banned from NHRA competition in its factory form. Dodge leaned into the controversy, turning the NHRA's rejection into marketing gold with slogans like "Banned by the NHRA" and "Too much power for the rulebook." Critics of the NHRA pointed out the irony. The same organization that once banned nitro to slow things down was now restricting factory cars for being too fast. Supporters argued it was about protecting drivers and maintaining consistent safety rules across classes. Regardless, the demons became symbols of the tension between factory innovation and sanctioning body control. Cars the NHRA didn't want dominating its rulebook. Then there are the earlier examples, twin-engine dragsters and wild fuel altereds of the 1960s. During the nitro ban, racers like Art Malone and Big Daddy Don Garlits experimented with dual-engine setups on gasoline to recapture the spectacle. Some of these monsters were so powerful and unpredictable that the NHRA eventually restricted them or forced chassis changes. Fuel altereds, short wheelbase, wildly powerful, often unblown nitro cars, were another headache. Their lack of front brakes, short wheelbases, and tendency to wheel stand or get airborne led to repeated rule tightenings and outright bans in certain configurations. Each of these cases shares a common thread. A car or technology arrives that is either too fast, too unconventional, or too risky for the current rulebook. The NHRA responds with restrictions, bans, or quiet pressure to remove branding and visibility. Whether it's genuine safety concern, protection of the sport's image, or maintaining competitive balance, the result is the same. Certain machines become hidden from official competition, living on only in photos, videos, and the memories of fans who saw them before the hammer fell. These moments remind us that drag racing has always walked a razor's edge between progress and control. The NHRA's decisions have kept the sport alive for over 70 years, but they've also created a long list of what-if cars, the ones they didn't want you to see in their full glory. And that tension is exactly what makes the history so compelling. So was the 1957 nitro ban, and the later restrictions on cars like the two-seater Top Fuel, the Demons, and the Wild Fuel Altereds really a deliberate cover-up? Or was it just tough, necessary decisions to keep drag racing alive? The truth, as always, sits somewhere in the messy middle. Let's start with the safety argument, because it's the strongest and most documented side. In the mid-1950s, nitro was a monster. Engines weren't built to handle the extreme heat and pressure for long runs. Aluminum rods would stretch like taffy, pistons would melt, and blow-ups were frequent and violent. When parts failed at 150+ mph, debris flew everywhere, into the stands, into other cars, into the timing towers. Fires were common because nitro is highly flammable and burns invisibly in daylight. Track workers were getting hurt, racers were getting hurt worse, and spectators were starting to get scared. Insurance companies were watching closely. In the 1950s, drag racing was still a fringe sport. One major spectator injury or fatality could have led to tracks being shut down by local authorities or insurers refusing coverage altogether. Wally Parks and the NHRA leadership knew this better than anyone. Parks had spent years fighting to get hot rodding off public roads and into controlled environments precisely to avoid that fate. The nitro ban bought time to develop stronger components, better containment, fire suppression systems, and more durable engines. When nitro returned in 1964, the cars were safer and more reliable because those 6 years forced real engineering progress. Look at later tragedies for proof that the danger was real. Scott Kalida's fatal crash in 2008, when his Top Fuel car exploded and crashed at 300 miles per hour, showed that even with modern safety tech, nitro remains inherently violent. Imagine that same power in 1957, with primitive chassis, no parachutes, no carbon fiber shielding, and no real medical response teams. The ban likely saved lives and preserved the sport. But the other side can't be ignored. Many racers and historians argue the ban went too far and lasted too long. Nitro wasn't the only dangerous thing on the track. Gasoline cars were blowing up too, and dual-engine gas setups that replaced nitro were often just as wild. Some believe the real motivation was control and image. The NHRA wanted drag racing to be seen as a legitimate motorsport, not a backyard sideshow with flames and explosions. By forcing gas-only rules, they created a cleaner, more predictable product that was easier to insure, easier to promote to sponsors, and easier to defend to the public and government. The ban also conveniently weakened rival organizations. The NHRA thrived on nitro during those years, drawing huge crowds to outlaw meets. By keeping nitro out of NHRA events, the NHRA forced racers to choose sides, stay loyal and run gas, or go independent and lose national points, big purses, and mainstream exposure. It was a power move, whether intentional or not. When nitro finally came back in 1964, speeds didn't just recover, they exploded. Don Garlits hit 200 miles per hour within months, and Top Fuel became the crown jewel of the sport. That rapid progress makes you wonder, If the NHRA had allowed controlled nitro development from 1957 onward, perhaps with stricter safety mandates instead of a total ban, how much faster would the sport have evolved? Could we have seen 250 miles per hour quarter miles in the 1970s instead of waiting until the 1990s? Some old-timers swear the answer is yes. The later bans tell a similar story. The Larry Dixon two-seater was rejected for safety, but it was also a PR nightmare waiting to happen. The Dodge Demons were blocked from stock classes because they were too fast for the existing safety standards, but those standards hadn't been updated in years. In both cases, the NHRA chose caution over innovation, protecting the rulebook and the status quo. In the end, the cover-up label is half right. There was no grand conspiracy with secret meetings and hidden documents. But there was a pattern. When something threatened the sport's survival, image, or control, the NHRA acted decisively, sometimes too decisively, to suppress it. Safety was always the public reason, and often the real one. But control and self-preservation were right there too. Drag racing owes its existence today to those tough calls. Without the 1957 ban, the sport might have burned out in a blaze of glory by 1960. Yet the cars that were sidelined, the technologies that were delayed, and the what-if moments still haunt the history books. They're the hidden truths, not lies, exactly, but choices that were made in the shadows to keep the lights on. That brings us to the big question. Knowing what we know now, would you have lifted the ban sooner? Or was it the only way to save the sport? That's up to you to decide. We've traveled through one of the most explosive chapters in drag racing history, from the wild, flame-throwing nitro runs of the mid-1950s, to Emory Cook shattering the 160 miles per hour barrier in February 1957, to the swift and sweeping decision that silenced nitro across the NHRA for 6 long years. We've seen how that ban reshaped the sport, pushed innovation in unexpected directions, and created a shadow world of outlaw meets where the real speed demons still roared. We've looked at the later echoes, the two-seater top fuel that never got its chance, the factory demons that were too much for the rulebook, and the fuel altereds that danced on the edge of chaos. So what do we make of it all? Was the NHRA's biggest cover-up really a cover-up at all? The truth is layered. Safety wasn't just a convenient excuse, it was a genuine crisis. Without the 1957 nitro ban, drag racing could have burned itself out in a series of catastrophic accidents, insurance denials, and public backlash. Wally Parks and the early leaders weren't villains. They were guardians trying to turn a backyard rebellion into a lasting, legitimate motorsport. The ban gave the sport breathing room to mature, better chassis, stronger parts, improved safety gear. And when nitro finally returned in 1964, top fuel didn't just survive. It became the fastest, most spectacular class in motorsports history. But the other side stings. That 6-year pause did delay progress. Technologies that were already proving themselves were sidelined, and the NHRA's firm grip on the rulebook has repeatedly shown a preference for control over unchecked innovation. The pattern repeats. When something arrives that's too fast, too wild, or too disruptive, the response is restriction first, evolution later. It's kept drag racing alive for over 7 decades, but it's also left us with a long list of what-if machines, the cars they didn't want you to see in their full, unbridled glory. Today, top fuel cars regularly exceed 340 miles per hour in the quarter mile, on the very same nitromethane that was once declared too dangerous to exist. That evolution proves the technology was never the problem. It was the timing, the infrastructure, and the willingness to take calculated risks. The NHRA got it right by slowing things down when they had to, and maybe got it wrong by holding on too long when they didn't. This story isn't about picking sides. It's about understanding that drag racing at its core is a constant negotiation between speed and survival, innovation and responsibility, freedom and order. The hidden truths aren't buried lies. They're tough choices made under pressure, choices that shaped the sport we love today. Now it's your turn. Knowing the full story, the raw power of 1957, the fear it inspired, the years of exile, and the triumphant return, where do you stand? Was the nitro ban the only way to save drag racing, or did it rob us of a faster, wilder future? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Tell me, conspiracy or necessary safety move? And if you've got your own stories, maybe you saw an outlaw nitro run in the 50s or 60s, or you remember the day the demons got banned, share them. I read every one. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the hidden side of NHRA history, smash that like button. It really helps the channel. Hit subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next one. We've got more untold stories coming. lost cars, forgotten rivalries, and the machines that changed everything. Thanks for watching. Keep the throttle down, stay safe, and we'll see you at the strip. Until next time, this is the hidden truth of drag racing. Peace out.